The start of an unexpected day. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the small cafe as sunlight streamed through its large front windows, illuminating the worn wooden tables and mismatched chairs. For Dinah Collins, the cafe was her second home, though not by choice. It was where she spent long hours on her feet, serving customers, wiping down tables, and dreaming of a better life. She had started this job 6 months ago after losing her office position, and every shift felt like another test of her resilience. That particular afternoon was no different. The cafe was in its usual lull, quiet conversations mixed with the occasional clink of a coffee cup against a saucer. Dinah's feet ached, her back was sore, and her patience was running thin. The day had been slow, both in pace and in tips. Rent was due in a few days, and she was painfully aware that she was short on cash. Still, she pushed through, holding on to the hope that maybe the next table would leave her a generous tip, or at least brighten her mood. The bell above the cafe door jingled, breaking her from her thoughts. She looked up, expecting to see another regular customer, or perhaps a pair of tourists. Instead, her gaze landed on a young man who looked slightly out of place. He was tall and lean, with an air of quiet confidence that made him seem older than he probably was. His simple white shirt and dark slacks were nothing extraordinary, yet there was something polished about him, something that suggested he wasn't an ordinary customer. 2 other men followed closely behind him, their movements deliberate and watchful. Dinah's first thought was that they looked like bodyguards, though she quickly dismissed the idea. This wasn't the type of neighborhood that attracted celebrities or public figures. The cafe was quaint and unassuming, tucked away from the hustle and bustle of the city. The young man scanned the room briefly before choosing a table in the far corner, away from the other patrons. His bodyguards, or whoever they were, took seats nearby, their eyes surveying the room with practiced precision. Dinah hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach. She took a deep breath, grabbed her notepad, and made her way to the table. "Good afternoon," she said, mustering her best smile. "Can I get you something to drink to start?" The young man looked up, and Dinah felt her breath catch. His features were sharp yet soft, his expression calm yet carrying an undercurrent of thoughtfulness. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't quite place it. "A cappuccino would be great," he said, his voice polite and steady. "And maybe one of those croissants." "Of course," Dinah replied, scribbling down the order. "Anything else?" He shook his head. "No, that's all for now." "Thank you." As she walked back to the counter, Dinah couldn't shake the feeling that she knew him from somewhere. His face lingered in her mind like a faint memory just out of reach. It wasn't until she was frothing the milk for his cappuccino that it hit her. Barron Trump. She had seen his face on the news and in magazines, though he looked older now, more mature. Her heart raced as she realized she had just taken the order of the son of a former president. She glanced back at his table, careful not to stare. He was sitting quietly, looking out the window with a distant expression. Unlike most customers, he wasn't glued to his phone or working on a laptop. He seemed content to simply sit and observe, a rarity in a world dominated by screens and constant distractions. Dinah couldn't help but wonder what had brought him to this little cafe. It wasn't the kind of place that catered to high-profile individuals. Maybe he was just passing through, seeking a quiet moment away from the spotlight. Whatever the reason, she felt a strange sense of curiosity about him, as if there was more to his presence than met the eye. She delivered his order with her usual professionalism, placing the cappuccino and croissant on the table with a polite smile. "Here you go. Let me know if you need anything else." "Thank you," he said, meeting her eyes briefly before returning his gaze to the window. As Dinah walked away, she felt a peculiar flutter in her chest. It wasn't attraction, exactly, more like a mix of nerves and intrigue. She had served countless customers during her time at the cafe, but something about this interaction felt different, almost significant. The afternoon wore on, and the cafe remained quiet. Dinah busied herself with cleaning tables and refilling condiment trays, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Barron. She noticed him occasionally glancing around the room, his expression thoughtful but unreadable. When he finished his meal, he pulled out a pen and wrote something on the receipt. Dinah watched from the corner of her eye as he folded the paper neatly and tucked it under the coffee cup. He stood, gathered his belongings, and walked toward the door. "Thank you for coming," Dinah called out, her voice softer than usual. Barron turned slightly, offering her a faint smile. "Have a good day." The bell above the door jingled as he left, and Dinah felt an inexplicable sense of loss, as if the room had suddenly become emptier. She walked over to his table to clear the dishes, her eyes drawn to the folded receipt. She picked it up, expecting to find a standard tip or perhaps a polite note of thanks. What she saw instead made her freeze in place, the note that changed everything. Dinah stood at the table, her hand trembling slightly as she unfolded the receipt. She expected a standard gratuity or perhaps a few kind words, but what she saw left her breathless. Written in a neat, deliberate script were the words, "You're doing an incredible job. Never forget that your efforts don't go unnoticed. This is for you. Use it to breathe easier, even if just for a little while." Beneath the note was something even more shocking, a crisp stack of $100 bills, carefully folded and tucked under the receipt. Dinah's heart pounded in her chest as she counted the money. $5,000. She stared at the cash, her mind racing. Was this some kind of mistake? A prank? Who leaves that kind of tip in a small, unassuming cafe like this? And yet, the words on the note were undeniably genuine, resonating with a sincerity that brought tears to her eyes. Dinah looked around the cafe, half expecting Barron to reappear and explain himself. But he was gone, the bell above the door still swinging faintly from his departure. His bodyguards had vanished too, blending seamlessly back into the anonymity of the street outside. She clutched the note and money tightly, her thoughts spiraling. For months, she had been struggling to stay afloat. Her rent was overdue, her utility bills piled up on the kitchen counter, and her phone had been disconnected twice in the past year. She worked double shifts at the cafe, yet her pay barely covered the essentials. The overwhelming weight of her reality crashed down on her in that moment. She thought about her daughter, Lily, who was only 6 years old and had been asking for a new backpack for school. Dinah had promised she'd get one, but deep down, she wasn't sure how she'd manage it. Now, with this unexpected generosity, the impossible suddenly seemed within reach. But even as relief flooded her, doubt crept in. Why would Barron Trump, someone from such a vastly different world, do this for her? He didn't know her struggles, her story, or the countless sacrifices she had made to keep her life together. And yet, his note suggested otherwise, as if he understood something about her life that most people missed. Dinah's manager, Claire, noticed her standing frozen by the table and walked over, her brow furrowed with concern. "Dinah, are you okay?" Dinah blinked, snapping back to reality. She quickly folded the note and money, hiding them in her apron pocket. "Yeah, I'm fine," she said, her voice shaky. Claire tilted her head, clearly unconvinced. "You've been standing here for a while. Did something happen?" For a moment, Dinah considered telling Claire about the tip, but something stopped her. She wasn't sure why, but she felt the need to keep this moment private, at least for now. "No, nothing," Dinah said, forcing a smile. "Just lost in thought, I guess." Claire nodded slowly, her eyes lingering on Dinah. "Well, if you're sure, let me know if you need a break." Dinah nodded and went back to clearing the table, her mind still reeling. She finished the rest of her shift in a haze, replaying the encounter with Barron over and over again. Every detail seemed to take on new significance. The way he had looked out the window, the calm politeness in his voice, the almost imperceptible weight of his gaze when he thanked her. When her shift finally ended, Dinah grabbed her things and hurried out of the cafe. The cool evening air hit her face as she stepped onto the sidewalk, her mind still spinning. She needed to process what had just happened, but first, she had to pick up Lily from her friend's house. The small apartment Dinah shared with Lily was modest, to say the least. The walls were scuffed, the furniture was secondhand, and the kitchen faucet dripped incessantly despite her best attempts to fix it. But it was home, and Dinah did everything she could to make it a safe, happy place for her daughter. That night, as she tucked Lily into bed, Dinah couldn't stop thinking about the note and the money. She stared at the folded receipt on the kitchen table, the words etched into her memory. "You're doing an incredible job. Never forget that your efforts don't go unnoticed." Dinah whispered the words to herself, feeling their weight settle in her chest. It wasn't just the money. It was the validation, the recognition that someone had seen her, truly seen her, in a way that most people didn't. As she sat alone in the dimly lit kitchen, Dinah thought about writing a letter of thanks. But how could she possibly express the depth of her gratitude? How could she tell Barron Trump that his kindness had done more than just pay her bills? It had given her hope. Dinah decided she needed to do something meaningful with the money, something that would honor the generosity she had received. She couldn't just use it to pay off her debts and move on as if nothing had happened. This moment deserved more. The next day, Dinah woke up with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in months. She made a list of priorities: pay rent, buy Lily's backpack, and set aside money for emergencies. But there was one item on the list that stood out. She wanted to pay it forward. Dinah didn't have Barron's wealth or influence, but she had a story of struggle, resilience, and the unexpected kindness of a stranger. She decided to share her experience anonymously online, hoping it might inspire others to show compassion in their own lives. She wrote, "Yesterday, a customer left me a note and a tip that changed my life. I won't share their name, but I want to share the message they left behind. You're doing an incredible job. Never forget that your efforts don't go unnoticed." It reminded me that even in our darkest moments, kindness can find us in the most unexpected ways. Let's all strive to be that source of life for someone else. She hit post and closed her laptop, not expecting much to come of it. But within hours, her story began to gain traction. Comments poured in from strangers around the world, sharing their own experiences of kindness and expressing their gratitude for her reminder that humanity still had its bright spots. Dinah read each comment with tears in her eyes, feeling a connection to people she had never met. Barron's act of generosity had created a ripple effect, spreading hope far beyond the walls of the little cafe where it had all begun. As the story gained momentum, Dinah began to realize that this was just the beginning. The ripple effect. By the next morning, Dinah's anonymous post had gone viral. Her modest story about an unexpected act of kindness resonated deeply with people from all walks of life. Comments flooded in, ranging from heartfelt gratitude to inspired resolutions to pay it forward. Strangers around the globe were pledging to perform their own acts of kindness, each small gesture adding to the ripple effect Barron Trump had unknowingly started. But while the online world buzzed with her story, Dinah's day started as it always did, with a strong cup of coffee and a reluctant glance at her to-do list. Today, however, she felt a flicker of hope she hadn't experienced in months. The $5,000 tip sat safely in a small envelope in her bag, and she had made a plan for it. After dropping Lily off at school, Dinah headed to the landlord's office to pay her overdue rent. The relief on her landlord's face was almost comical. "Dinah," he said, his tone a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "I honestly didn't expect this today. I was preparing to send you another late notice." Dinah smiled faintly, sliding the envelope across the desk. "Consider it handled. Thank you for your patience." As she walked out of the office, a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying seemed to lift from her shoulders. For the first time in months, her housing situation was stable, and she wouldn't have to face the anxiety of an eviction notice hanging over her head. But Dinah wasn't done yet. She made her way to the nearest department store, where she finally purchased the backpack Lily had been asking for. It was bright pink with sparkly unicorns and a matching pencil case. Exactly what Lily had wanted. Dinah smiled as she imagined the look on her daughter's face when she saw it. That afternoon, as Dinah returned to the cafe for her shift, she noticed something unusual. The cafe was busier than it had been in weeks, with customers occupying nearly every table. Claire, her manager, looked frazzled but happy as she bustled between the kitchen and the counter. "What's going on?" Dinah asked as she tied her apron around her waist. Claire gestured toward a group of patrons at the far end of the room. "It's the story," she said. "Ever since you posted it, people have been coming in, curious about where it happened. I had no idea your post would cause such a stir." Dinah froze, her heart pounding. She hadn't expected anyone to connect her story to the cafe, but in hindsight, it made sense. The details she'd included, the small, quiet cafe, the note left behind, had been enough for people to figure it out. As she worked her shift, Dinah found herself interacting with customers who had come specifically because of the story. One woman told Dinah she had been inspired to leave a large tip for her server at a different cafe earlier that morning. A man shared how he had decided to donate to a local charity after reading her post. Dinah listened to each story with a mixture of humility and awe. She hadn't realized how far her words could reach, or how much impact one small act of kindness could have. Later that evening, after the cafe had closed and the tables were cleared, Claire approached Dinah with an envelope in hand. "This came for you earlier," Claire said, handing it over. One of the customers dropped it off and said it was for the waitress who inspired them. Dinah's brows furrowed as she opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and another stack of cash. The note read, "Your story reminded me that we all have the power to make someone's day brighter. Here's a little something to help you keep moving forward. Thank you for sharing your light with the world." Dinah's breath caught as she counted the money. Another $1,000. Her hands shook as she clutched the envelope, overwhelmed by the generosity of yet another stranger. The next day, Dinah decided it was time to take the ripple effect a step further. She set aside $1,000 from Barron's tip and the additional money she had received, determined to create her own act of kindness. She visited a local community center that hosted programs for underprivileged children and families. The center's director, Mrs. Harris, was a kind but overwhelmed woman who had been running the facility on a shoestring budget for years. "I'd like to make a donation," Dinah said, handing over the envelope. Mrs. Harris's eyes widened as she opened it. "This is incredibly generous," she said, her voice trembling. "Are you sure?" Dinah nodded. "I've been given a gift, and I want to share it. Your programs make such a difference in this community, and I know you'll put this to good use." Mrs. Harris hugged Dinah tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You have no idea how much this will help. Thank you." As Dinah left the community center, she felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond financial relief. She had taken the kindness she'd received and turned it into something meaningful, something that would continue to impact others. That evening, as she tucked Lily into bed, Dinah shared the story of the community center donation. "You did that, Mommy?" Lily asked, her wide eyes filled with admiration. Dinah nodded. "I did. And do you know why? Because someone was kind to me, and I wanted to be kind to others. Kindness is like magic. It grows when you share it." Lily smiled, her little hands clutching the straps of her new backpack. "I want to be kind too, Mommy, just like you." Dinah kissed her daughter's forehead, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for the events that had brought them to this moment. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face it, with hope, resilience, and a heart full of gratitude. An unexpected invitation. The morning air was crisp as Dinah walked Lily to school. The leaves rustled underfoot, their colors a vibrant mix of gold and crimson. Lily skipped ahead, swinging her unicorn backpack, her face lit with a joy that had been absent for far too long. Seeing her daughter so happy filled Dinah with a sense of calm. When Dinah returned home, she checked her phone out of habit. Notifications poured in from social media platforms where her story had continued to spread. Among the countless messages of support and encouragement, one stood out, a formal email from a sender she didn't recognize. Subject: an invitation to share your story. The message was concise but intriguing. Dear Ms. Collins, my name is Amanda Reynolds, and I represent a nonprofit organization dedicated to inspiring acts of kindness. Your story has deeply touched our community, and we would love for you to speak at our upcoming charity gala. It's an opportunity to share your journey and the impact of a simple act of kindness. We believe your voice can inspire others to take similar actions. Please let us know if you're interested. Travel and accommodations will be fully covered. Warm regards, Amanda Reynolds. Dinah read the email twice, her heart pounding. The idea of speaking at a gala was both thrilling and terrifying. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the thought of addressing a room full of strangers felt daunting. Still, something inside her stirred. This was an opportunity to amplify the message that had already touched so many lives. Later that day, Dinah mentioned the email to Claire during her shift at the cafe. You have to do it, Claire said, her enthusiasm almost infectious. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Dinah. Think about how many people you could inspire. I don't know, Dinah replied, her voice uncertain. What if I mess up? What if I'm not good enough to stand in front of all those people? Claire placed a reassuring hand on Dinah's shoulder. You're underestimating yourself. Your story is powerful because it's real. Just be yourself, and you'll do great. Dinah thought about it throughout her shift, weighing her fears against the potential impact. By the time the cafe closed for the evening, she had made her decision. She emailed Amanda Reynolds, accepting the invitation. The gala was set to take place in New York City, a bustling metropolis Dinah had only ever seen in movies. A week later, she found herself boarding a train, her nerves a tangled knot. She had borrowed a simple but elegant dress from Claire, who insisted it was perfect for the occasion. When Dinah arrived at the venue, she was awestruck. The grand ballroom was adorned with sparkling chandeliers and intricate floral arrangements. The air buzzed with the hum of conversation, and the crowd was a mix of philanthropists, activists, and ordinary people who believed in the power of kindness. Amanda Reynolds greeted Dinah warmly, her presence both professional and comforting. We're so honored to have you here, she said, guiding Dinah toward the stage. Dinah's heart raced as she stepped up to the podium, the spotlight glaring down on her. She glanced at the crowd, her mind momentarily blank. But then she remembered Lily's smile, the stranger's generosity, and the overwhelming kindness that had brought her to this moment. She took a deep breath and began to speak. Dinah started her speech with a story about Lily and the challenges they had faced as a single-parent family. She recounted the exhaustion of long shifts at the cafe, the mounting bills, and the constant worry about making ends meet. Then she spoke about the day Barron Trump had walked into her cafe and left her a note and a life-changing tip. The money was a blessing, Dinah said, her voice steady. But it was the message that truly changed me. It reminded me that even in the hardest moments, kindness can find its way to you, and it inspired me to pass that kindness on to others. She shared how she had used a portion of the tip to help the local community center, how it had reignited her hope, and how it had inspired others to do the same. As she spoke, she saw nods of agreement and smiles of encouragement ripple through the audience. When Dinah finished, the room erupted into applause. She felt a wave of relief and pride wash over her as she stepped off the stage. Amanda met her with a beaming smile. You were incredible, Amanda said. Your story will stay with everyone here tonight. After the speech, Dinah mingled with the attendees, many of whom approached her to share their own stories of kindness or express how much her words had moved them. One man, a wealthy philanthropist, handed her his business card. I run a foundation that supports single mothers, he said. If you ever need assistance or want to collaborate, don't hesitate to reach out. Another woman, an educator, invited Dinah to speak at her school, believing her story could inspire students to believe in the power of compassion. By the end of the evening, Dinah felt a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. The gala wasn't just about celebrating her story. It was about creating a movement. She realized that her journey was far from over. As she returned to her hotel room that night, Dinah sat by the window, staring at the city lights. She thought about how far she had come and how much further she could go. The future felt uncertain, but filled with possibility.